Hi there. Now that you have a pretty good feel for the arcade library and how to do a platformer, I wanted to do a demonstration on how to write a game that's not a platformer. So I went back and forth on what kind of game to do, and I settled on a space style kind of shooter game, right? Where we're going to have a spaceship flying through the sky. There'll be some other enemy spaceships that are generated that appear that are going to shoot at our spacecraft. We can shoot them back. There'll be asteroids to dodge, things like that. So the big difference between this and a platformer, I guess, would be the movement in this is going to kind of be automatic vertically, like so you can go up the screen, and the player will have control side to side and when to shoot. Whereas with the platformer, the player has kind of control side to side and can jump. But so they have more control, I guess, with the movement, whereas this is going to be kind of an auto-scrolling style game. So the first thing you should do is download the starter code. If you haven't already, make sure you get the starter code and unzip that zip file. It'll have not just the starter code, this file game.py. It's if you look in the folder, you'll also see that there's an images folder with some images and a sounds folder with some sounds. Now, most of these images are taken from kenny.nl, and the sounds I got from a few different sources. So I will give you links to those to get full attribution. I'll add that as some comments in the starter code. So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and get started. Now, when you run this starter code, you should immediately get a maroon window appearing with the title Space Blaster. Of course, you can't see the title in my video, but yeah. Okay. So let's go ahead and get started. The first thing I'm going to do is get the background showing up, I suppose. So inside of my setup method here, seen this before, we're going to go ahead and make a variable self.background. And I'm going to set it to arcade.load texture. And load texture is going to load, it's in the images folder, and it's called bg.jpg. Okay. And so then on draw, after I've started the render, then what we're going to do is we're going to do arcade.draw, and I believe it's lower right width height. Okay. And this is expecting an X value for the bottom left. So I'm going to say 0, 0. It's expecting a width and a height. Well, those are screen width and screen height. And it's expecting a texture. So that's going to be self.background. Okay. So now if we run this, we should now see that image as a background. And so, as you can see, I just basically picked an image that looks kind of like space. Cool picture I found, thought I would use it. Okay. So we've got that working. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and create a player class. Okay, so go up here and I'm going to go ahead and say class player. And this is going to subclass the sprite. Okay. And the reason that I'm subclassing sprite here is because player is going to have a couple of methods that a sprite doesn't have. For example, it's going to be able to shoot, which is then going to basically create another instance of another class called laser. So yeah. Now, lots of times I would actually put this into a different file. To keep things simple, I'm just going to we're going to have one big old game.py file. So it's going to be more complex code-wise looking, but it'll be easier instead of having to switch between different files. So trade-offs. And so I'm going to write my init method, and it's going to have an X, a Y. There we go. And then let's see here. We're going to go ahead and call supers init, because remember it subclasses sprite. And so when we call the sprites method, it basically just requires the image for the sprite. So that's under images / and if I go under files, I believe it was player ship1 red.png. Player ship1 underscore red.png. All right. And so we're going to go ahead and inside of our game class, let me close out files here. Inside of our game class, in my init method, I'm going to go ahead and say self.player equals none. Okay. And then inside of my setup, I'm going to go ahead and say self.player equals player. And we need to give it an X and a Y coordinate. So I'm going to make our player be on the bottom about halfway. So I'm going to say screen width divided by 2. And then I'm going to make it a little bit above the bottom. So I'm just going to say like 100. Okay. And then inside of onDraw, we're going to tell the player to draw. Self.player.draw. And likewise in the onUpdate, we're going to go ahead and say self.player.update. And so now we can see, well, he didn't go where we expected. So that's because in our player class, right, we didn't actually do anything with this XY. So we need to make sure that we say self.centerX equals X, self.center Y equals Y. Now if we run this, there we go. Now he's a little bit too big given the size of this window. So we're going to go ahead and say self.scale equals, and we're going to scale him down to like, I don't know, let's say a quarter size. Oh, that's too small. So let's make him half the size, 0.5. Cool, so that's looking better. He's too high up here, so that's easy to change. Come down here and change that to 50. Run this again, and that's looking pretty good. So again, the idea here is that our ship here is going to be player controlled, but only left to right. So it's going to be able to move left and right with the keyboard. We're going to have enemies appearing up here, and they're going to be shooting at each other. So we'll have enemies and we'll have asteroids. Okay. So let's go ahead and get the ship moving back and forth. So if we think about it, that would probably be in the on key press. So if we press, if the key is equal to arcade.key. I think it's left. Let's go ahead and say self.player.change x equals, let's see, left would be negative, so let's say we get -5. Now remember, notice I'm doing change x and not just the center x. Change x has to do with how fast it's going to change, whereas center x has to do with its actual location. So the update method for a sprite automatically will change its x coordinate based off of this change x variable. Okay, I'm going to say if key is equal to arcade.key.right, then self.player.change x equals +5. Okay. And then we're going to make it so that if we release the key, it stops. So I'm going to basically, what I did there, when you saw me highlight this, I copied this, paste it, and if we release the left key, then change x changes to 0, right key changes to 0. Okay, so now if we run this, we should get our ship moving left and right using, I'm pressing the left and the right keys. The up and the down keys in this game aren't going to do anything. I'm going to give our player a list called lasers. The purpose of this list is it's going to be a list of some laser sprites essentially. Okay, so but our laser sprites aren't going to do anything specifically different from what a normal sprite does, so I'm not going to subclass sprite. What I'm going to do is I'm going to write a shoot method though. And so what shoot is going to do is it's going to create a laser and put it into the lasers list. Okay, so we'll say self.lasers.append arcade.sprite. and we're going to give it images slash, and again I'm going to go to view files, and the file name is playerlaser.png. Okay, so images playerlaser.png. Okay, now the location of this particular sprite. All right, so I say, sorry, there we go, comma. Okay, so it's going to be the sprite, that's the image. We're going to have its center x is going to be self.centerx. In other words, it's centered on the player. So its center y is going to be the y value of our ship, but I want it above our ship a decent amount. So I'm gonna hard code 100 right now. That might change later. And actually, before I append this, instead of appending straight off, I'm gonna say laser or shot equals this sprite. Okay. So I'm going to clean this up a little bit. There we go. Clean this up a little bit. Now the reason that I'm doing this is because I want to adjust some more stuff about shot before I add it. So for example, I want shot dot change y to be whatever the shot speed is. Let's say self dot shot speed equals 10. I don't know how fast that is, so shot speed. Okay. And then we'll go ahead and do self.lasers.append shot. Okay. And so now we're going to go ahead and make it so we can shoot. So that's going to be in my on key press. If key equals arcade.key.space, then self.player.shoot. Run this, press space, and nothing's happening. Okay, not unusual, not terribly unexpected, because we actually didn't tell it to draw the lasers. So inside of my player, I need to tell when my player draws. So self, oops, I need to say draw self. Now draw is already working, so I'm going to go ahead and call super draw. But then I also need to tell each of my shots to draw. So we're going to use a for loop, and you've seen this. We've used for loops all year long, but with this arcade tutorial, you've seen a different style of for loop than we used in class a lot, and this is what's called a for each loop. So instead of saying for I in range and then going through, we can actually say for each shot in lasers. And what this is going to do is it's going to go into this list, and it's going to give each element of that list the variable name shot, just temporarily. So we can refer to it by this name shot. So I'm going to say for shot in lasers, shot.draw. Okay, so now I'm going to run this again. That's a good error. You've probably seen that before, saying lasers is not defined, and that's because it's not lasers, it's self.lasers. Okay, so now if I press space, there's the laser. Now notice that the laser stays put. And that's because, kind of like how we weren't telling it each shot to draw, we also weren't telling each shot to update. So we're going to say, I'm going to write an update method. Now, update is already working, so I'm going to call super's update method. That way the ship moves as we'd expect. But now in the same way that I did it here, for shot in self.lasers, I'm going to say for shot in self.lasers shot.update. And now we have our laser shooting. Now it's starting a little bit too far away. All right, so that's pretty easy to fix. I'm going to make this equal that plus 50. Right, so when I add the shot, it starts at the ship's y plus 50. That looks better. Cool. You'll notice that I can shoot while I'm moving. Okay. Now the one thing that we're not seeing is when the lasers go off the screen, what's happening to them. Right? So what we're actually going to do is we need to make sure that only the shots that are actually visible on the screen are still inside of my shots list, because let's see here, I'm going to go ahead and print self.lasers really quick just so you can see what's happening inside of update. You don't do this code, but I'm just going to do this. Okay, so notice it's empty, and then I shoot, and as I shoot more and more, it keeps on adding to this list, and it's going to keep adding forever, and eventually we'll actually run out of memory. So we don't want that. So what we're going to do is we're going to do shot.update, and then we're going to say, well, if shot.center_y is greater than the screen height plus I don't know, 100. Let's say it's 100 off the screen, right? Then we're going to remove shot from the list. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and make a new list here. I'm going to say toRemove equals an empty list. So if it's there, then it'll be toRemove.append shot. Okay. So now after this is over, I'm going to say for shot in toRemove lasers, self.lasers.remove shot. And what that's going to do is it should keep, if we run this code again, where I'm printing self.lasers, okay, again, notice what it's running, it's empty. I shoot, there's something there, and then it's empty. I shoot, there's something there, it's empty. So as the shot goes off the screen, it gets removed from this list. So I don't have to worry about eventually running out of memory. So that's important. Okay, so we have our ship is shooting. And so I think that's going to do it for this first video. We've made a little bit of progress, not a whole lot, but we have our ship now shooting. I'm just going to scroll slowly here. Notice that we have our on-key presses, we have our on-key releases. There is some other stuff in the starter code dealing with mouse functionality. I don't know if we'll get to that or not, but it is there if you are so inclined. And so thanks for watching this video, and we'll see you next time.